A Taiwanese prosecutor just searched an NVIDIA employee's home, seized his desk, and locked him up. And NVIDIA's own spokesperson had to go on record just to say, smuggling is a non-starter. Meanwhile, a Chinese memory company just told the world its RAM would save your wallet, and it turns out that was a lie. And AMD, the company that once mocked its own rival for selling a 4 GB graphics card, just launched one, under the same name as a completely different, better product. Let's get into it. Let's start in Taipei. On July 24th, investigators raided the home of an NVIDIA employee and searched his desk at the company's Taipei office. This wasn't a routine audit. Taiwanese prosecutors got a court order to detain him, and the accusations on paper are forgery and breach of trust. Now, here's something a lot of outlets are glossing over. Taiwan doesn't actually treat unauthorized chip exports to China as a criminal offense. So every single one of these cases, this one included, gets built on paperwork charges instead. Falsified shipping documents, fake business records. It's less smuggling ring bust and more we caught you lying on a form, but the form happens to be the thing standing between an NVIDIA AI chip and a Chinese buyer. This is also being described as the first time authorities have gone after an actual NVIDIA employee directly, rather than a reseller or a partner company. Back in May, 3 individuals were detained on similar forgery accusations tied to exporting NVIDIA AI chips to China. Then, in June, Taiwanese officials raided Supermicro Computer and a couple of its supply chain partners, and several employees were brought in for questioning. 2 of those Supermicro staffers are still being held pending a hearing. 2 were released on bail, so this new NVIDIA case isn't an isolated incident. It's the next link in a chain that started months ago. NVIDIA's response, on the record, is worth reading carefully because of how specific it is. Their spokesperson said the company primarily sells to well-known partners and OEMs who are responsible for making sure sales comply with U.S. export rules, and that even small shipments go through scrutiny on both sides of the world. Translation: if a chip ends up somewhere it shouldn't, NVIDIA wants you to know that's not their compliance process failing. That's someone downstream lying about where the box was going. Whether that argument holds up depends entirely on what prosecutors find on this guy's laptop. And right now, nobody outside that investigation actually knows. There's also a completely separate legal headache sitting on NVIDIA's desk right now, and this one has nothing to do with export controls. A California judge ruled that NVIDIA has to go to trial over accusations that it benefited from stolen trade secrets belonging to Valeo, a European auto supplier. The story here is almost cinematic. During a video call in 2021, Valeo employees saw their own confidential source code appear on the screen of an NVIDIA engineer before he closed the window. That engineer has since been convicted in Germany for stealing business secrets. Valeo took a screenshot, and now there's both a criminal case and a civil trial tied to it. NVIDIA hasn't been found guilty of anything in that case yet. The trial hasn't happened, but a judge looked at the evidence and decided it was strong enough to go in front of a jury. That's not nothing. So NVIDIA is dealing with chip export scrutiny in Taiwan and a trade secrets trial in California. At the same time, it's trying to convince investors it deserves its trillion-dollar valuation. And while all of that legal pressure builds around the world's most valuable chip company, there's a completely different kind of chaos brewing in memory chips. The actual RAM sitting inside your PC. And what's happening there might annoy you even more than any courtroom drama, because this one hits your wallet directly. Here's the setup you need first. RAM prices have been an absolute nightmare since late 2025. DDR5 kits that used to sit around $200 have in some cases quadrupled. Analysts at TrendForce were forecasting DRAM prices climbing another 50 to 60% just in the first quarter of this year. The reason is brutally simple. The same AI boom that's driving GPU demand is also driving demand for high bandwidth memory, and the big 3 manufacturers, Samsung, SK hynix, and Micron, are shifting production capacity toward the expensive AI stuff instead of the regular RAM sticks that go into your gaming rig. Less supply for consumers, same or higher demand, and prices go one direction. So when a Chinese state-backed memory maker called CXMT, Chongqing Memory Technologies, started showing up with dramatically lower prices, a lot of PC builders treated it like a rescue mission. Early reports had a 32GB CXMT module listed around $138, when the average price elsewhere was sitting between $300 and $400. That number spread everywhere. Reddit threads, forums, comment sections. People were genuinely excited that a fourth major player might finally break the price spiral. Here's the part that should slow you down. That headline number doesn't match what's actually happening on shelves. When outlets tracked real retail listings, the picture looked very different. A 64GB CXMT-based DDR5 module was found retailing for close to 19,000 Chinese yuan. That's roughly $2,800 US, which is actually more expensive than a comparable Samsung module with the same specs. Other tracking put CXMT's real-world savings closer to 7 to 10% below competitors, not the 60% discount the early hype implied. And there's a structural reason for that gap, not just corporate greed. CXMT doesn't have access to the most advanced lithography equipment because of US export restrictions, so it relies on older manufacturing techniques that produce larger, less efficient chips. Bigger dies mean fewer chips per wafer, and fewer chips per wafer means higher cost per unit, even for a company backed by the Chinese state. So think about it like this. Imagine a bakery gets government funding and promises bread 20% cheaper than everyone else in town. But their oven is a decade old, so they can only bake half as many loaves per batch. By the time you actually walk in and check the price tag, that cheap bread story doesn't hold up because their own equipment limitations ate the discount. That's basically what happened with CXMT. The savior narrative was real cheap on Twitter. It got a lot more expensive at the checkout counter, and CXMT isn't slowing down despite that. The company is reportedly pursuing a multi-billion-dollar Shanghai listing to fund even more expansion. And according to industry analysts, its revenue could jump something like 7 times year over year in the first half of this year alone, with full year 2026 revenue potentially crossing $50 billion. Some analysts project the company's share of global DRAM capacity could climb towards 17% by year end. That's a real, fast-growing competitor entering a market that used to be locked down by 3 companies. Whether that eventually cools prices for you and me, or whether CXMT just becomes a 4th company charging premium prices in a shortage, that's genuinely something experts differ on. Nobody serious is making a confident prediction either way yet, and you should be suspicious of anyone who tells you they know for sure. Now, here's where things get almost ironic, because the third story this week is about a company that had the perfect opportunity to undercut everyone on price, and instead did something that left a big chunk of the hardware community stunned. AMD just launched a new entry-level graphics card, the Radeon RX 9050, priced at $279. On paper, it's not a bad little card. RDNA 4 architecture, AMD's FSR Redstone upscaling, AV1 encoding, 3rd generation ray tracing hardware, running at a modest 92 watts. That's the 8GB retail version, the one you can actually walk into a store and buy in a box. But there's also a second version. Same name, same chip, same number of compute units, completely different product. This one has only 4GB of memory, and to get there, AMD cut the memory bus in half, from 128-bit down to 64-bit. That drops bandwidth from 288 gigabytes per second all the way down to 144. This $4G variant is OEM exclusive, meaning it's not sold on its own. It only shows up buried inside pre-built systems, like one CyberPower PC model that was listed at Best Buy for $889. Here's the detail that turned this from mildly annoying spec decision into a genuine controversy. Back in 2020, AMD published its own blog post criticizing competitors for selling 4GB graphics cards, stating plainly that 4 gigs of VRAM is, quote, not enough for today's games. That post got a lot of attention again in 2022 when people pointed back to it. Now in 2026, AMD has released its own 4GB card on a cut-down 64-bit bus that mirrors the memory configuration of the Radeon RX 6500 XT, a card that was widely regarded as one of the worst GPU launches of the last several years. Hardware analyst Daniel Owen called the move deceptive and anti-consumer, specifically because of how the naming works. If you're an experienced PC builder, you're going to check the spec sheet before you buy anything. But if you're the kind of buyer picking up a pre-built gaming PC from a big box store, you're trusting the name on the box. And Radeon RX 9050 tells you nothing about whether you're getting the 8GB version with a full memory bus, or the 4GB version that early reviews suggest struggles to hit even 30 frames per second in some modern titles. Independent testing out of Japan found the 4GB config falling meaningfully behind NVIDIA's competing RTX 5050, and well behind AMD's own higher-tier RX 9060 XT. To be fair to AMD here, because balance matters, the company has stated the 4GB card was built specifically for a system integrator partner, and that there are currently no plans to sell it at retail on its own. And the broader context genuinely matters too. This isn't happening in a vacuum. GDDR6 memory pricing has reportedly tripled or quadrupled recently, the same memory crunch driving the CXMT story we just covered. AMD executives have publicly acknowledged that Radeon prices are likely to keep climbing because of it. So is this pure corporate hypocrisy, or a genuinely difficult supply chain decision that happened to land in the worst possible optics? Reasonable people in the hardware community are landing on different answers, and honestly, both things can be true at once. It can be a real supply squeeze and a bad consumer-facing decision at the same time. Before we wrap up, 3 smaller stories are worth 20 seconds each because together they paint the bigger picture of where this industry is heading. First, AMD announced a major partnership with Anthropic, the AI company behind Claude, involving up to 2 gigawatts of AMD's Instinct MI455X GPUs, built into rack-scale systems alongside AMD's own EPYC server chips. That's a serious vote of confidence in AMD's data center hardware from a company that could have gone almost anywhere for that kind of compute. Second, NVIDIA has reportedly put up a financial backstop of around $250 billion tied to OpenAI, deepening a relationship where the line between customer and financial backer keeps getting blurrier. And third, Qualcomm has also raised prices recently, another data point in the same story we've been telling this whole video. Memory and components across this entire industry are getting more expensive, and nearly everyone touching hardware right now is adjusting for it in some way. So if you zoom out, 3 completely different headlines this week are actually the same headline wearing different outfits. An NVIDIA employee in legal trouble over how far the company's chips are allowed to travel. A Chinese memory maker promising relief from a supply crunch and quietly failing to deliver it at scale. And AMD navigating that exact same crunch by making a decision that undercuts a principle it publicly staked out 6 years ago. None of these companies are evil, and none of them are innocent either. They're all just responding in real time to a hardware market that's more squeezed than it's been in years. And none of them are being fully transparent about how much of that squeeze they're passing straight on to you. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, go ahead and hit subscribe, because we track this stuff every single week and none of it is slowing down anytime soon. What's actually going to decide how this plays out isn't a press release or a spec sheet. It's whether real competition, real memory supply, and real regulation catch up to a market that right now is being shaped more by scarcity than by choice. And that's a story that's still being written, one rated office and one leaked spec sheet at a time.